Hello, it's week 17 of season 4 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is My Fair Ernest T. Bass. Barney, what's up this week?
The audience sees Ernest T. Bass throw a rock through a window and break it. And then Mrs. Wiley comes into me and Andy in the courthouse, and she makes a retort that some strange man with a crazy laugh just broke her window with a rock, and then he came into our house and he caused all kinds of trouble, and then he wanted to see her daughter Ramona. And she turns in the rock to me, and I say, well, analyze this rock for clues. And Andy says that's not necessary, because he already knows who this guy is from her description. It's Ernest T. Bass. And I agree, and I say, we'll have this man in custody within an 18-hour period. You can bank on that. I want to thank you again for your cooperation and for your detailed information.
So you and Andy go out in the squad car and look for Ernest T. all over town when you are not successful. So you park in front of the courthouse, but before you get out of the car, you start psychoanalyzing Ernest T. to Andy because you've been reading a library book called Psychological Aspects of the Law.
And then we walk into the courthouse, and we see Ernest T. has already put himself in jail. And I tell him, you sure caused a lot of trouble over at Miss Wiley's house. They were pretty shook up over there. And Ernest T. says he's going to give us the uniform back that we gave him a few months ago to attract girls, because he says it didn't work. And he says he might just go find a cave and hermitize himself. And Andy says he'll help teach Ernest T. how to act right, so maybe he can attract a girl.
And lesson 1 is supper table etiquette. He has Ernest T. over for supper, and when OP asks him to please pass the bread, Ernest T. picks up a piece of bread with his fingers and throws it at OP. And then later he passes a potato with his hand rather than the whole plate of potatoes when he's asked to please pass the potatoes. And Andy and Aunt B, every time he messes up, keep correcting him.
And he starts getting pretty mad, but Andy says, we're just trying to help you fit into society. Do you want to find a girl or not? And then I come over later that night, and I say, I still say the whole thing is a waste of time. And Andy says, no, Ernest T. is making progress. And Andy's going to keep working on him, and then try to pass him off at the social tonight at Mrs. Wiley's house. And then after Ernest T. comes crashing into the room from upstairs, Andy gets me to demonstrate to him the proper way to enter a room. But Ernest T. don't pick up on it, just like I told Andy he wouldn't. And later, Andy works with him on how to talk, and on how to say things like, how do you do, Mrs. Wiley?
And Andy keeps working with him up to the point that Ernest T. is all dressed up and ready to go with him to Mrs. Wiley's in her social.
And I see him and I say, Ernest T. Andy, you're a genius. I didn't even know him. You've created a new person. And Andy's going to pass him off as his cousin Oliver from Raleigh. And Andy invites me to come too. And when they get there, Mrs. Wiley gets to talking to Oliver alone, and she realizes something about him, but she can't quite place it. And then I come in, and Andy tells me so far so good. And then Miss Wiley comes over and tells Andy she's figured out that Oliver's not from Raleigh, he's from Boston.
And y'all send him over to Ramona to ask her to dance, and she says yes. And they dance for a while, and then he takes her out to the porch and starts to tell her all his attributes as husband material. And he lifts her up to show how strong he is.
But then Mrs. Wiley gets them back inside for a tag dance. And Ernest T. gets tagged and he don't like it. But then Andy tells him just to go tag somebody else. But Ernest T. tags that same guy, but the guy don't leave when Ernest T. tags him. So Andy says just go tag him more firmly. So Ernest T. keeps trying, and then he breaks a vase of flowers over the guy's head.
And now Mrs. Wiley recognizes him as the guy who came in the night before after throwing a rock through the window, and he's not any cousin Oliver from Raleigh or from Boston. And she calls him an animal and a creature, and when he hears those terms, he goes crazy.
And Andy and I had to carry him outside, and I yelled, doggone it, Ernest T. Bass, I was right about you. There ain't no changing you. You can't make a silk purse out of the sow's ear. And then Ernest T. calms down, and he starts walking away and says thanks for trying. He reckons he'll give up his thoughts of femaling. But then Ramona comes running after him, saying she's hoping they could spend more time together. She says she likes him, so he picks her up again, and they go running off and skipping. And the next day, when I say to Andy, now why would Renona Wiley be attracted to somebody like Ernestine Das? Andy explains her background, that her ancestors weren't always well off and respectable, and I say, you see, blood will tell. It's just fantastic.
We'll see you next week for episode 18.